I've got the 280Z off the rotisserie today for a very important reason. We need to build a transmission mount. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Block Garage, and today, as you can see, the 280Z is not on the rotisserie. I've got it down on the quick jacks because we need to build a trans mount for the CD009. I purchased all the Apex engineered kit for the suspension, crossmember, all that stuff. However, I decided I wanted to build my own transmission mount. So that's what we're going to do today. While we get it down, I also need to measure for a drive shaft. So as you can see, I've got the Apex crossmember in. I've also got the rear subframe in with the Mustang differential. That way we got everything in there that we can get the 2JZ in and the CD009, and we can build our transmission mount and we can measure for a drive shaft. That way we can get that stuff all done, not have to worry about it later. And the other reason I want to put the engine and transmission in today is because I want to make 100% sure that we don't need to modify the transmission tunnel anymore. This CD009 transmission is quite a bit larger than the stock 5-speed transmission that came in the car. From what I know, there's plenty of room to fit it in here. We should not have to modify anything from what I have read, but I don't want to go to stick this in later after we've already prepped, painted, undercoated the bottom of the car, and then have to modify it. We might as well bust out all of these things all at once. We'll build the transmission mount, we'll measure for our drive shaft so that we can get that made up, and we'll make sure that the transmission tunnel does not need to be modified at all. So we're going to jump right into it. We'll get the 2JZ down off of the engine stand. We will get the CD009 bolted up to it, and then we can go and drop it in the car, which should be fairly simple. Because the Apex kit comes with engine mounts, I don't have to build those. We should just drop right in place. And if you've been following me on Facebook at all, I have mentioned a couple times that this video was supposed to be the completion of the entire roof skin swap. If you remember, a few weeks ago, Lila and I went down to Connecticut, got a used roof that was in much better shape than mine, mostly because it didn't have a giant hole in it from the sunroof. And I've got it 90% done. It's literally just waiting to weld that roof skin on. However, something has come up, and I don't want to spoil it now. I'll show you guys in that video. But it's kind of an exciting opportunity, and I can't put the roof skin on if I'm going to go that direction. So stick around. It should be the video after this one, or maybe the following. Depends on how quickly I get what I need. But since we're waiting on that, I figured it'd be a good opportunity to get the transmission mount done and measure for the drive shaft and everything else that I mentioned. Alright, we're going to throw the CD009 on. Remember, I got this bell housing adapter from Fish Racing, so we got a Nissan CD009 transmission going up to the 2JZ. And I'm not bothering putting the flywheel and clutch on right now. Okay. Oh, so as you guys see, we got the 2JZ mounted in the car, and it fits nice. It was actually very easy to drop in with those Apex mounts, popped right in place, and there is a ton of room in there. This is a very big engine bay, and the 2JZ actually sits much lower than I was anticipating. You know, I guess the stock motor was a straight 6.2, but I don't know. I just anticipated it would be a lot higher up, but it's perfect. It gets below your hood closure right here. Plenty of room. Obviously, there's going to be a lot more stuff in there once we get it all fully mounted and wired and plumbed and all that stuff. But it's a ton of room, and we've also obviously got the CD009 in there. It fits just fine in that transmission tunnel. I don't need to modify it at all. So that is a very big positive. I was worried, well, that's so much of a bigger transmission than the stock transmission. However, it fits fine. So next up, obviously, we need to build our transmission mount, because the only thing holding it up right now is the floor jack, which that doesn't do us any good. But we got to get building that transmission mount. So I picked up some stuff. This is what I found online that somebody else had made for a CD009 mount. Very simple, just a couple pieces of flat bar bent and a piece of tubing going side to side. Should be very easy to make. So I picked up some panels and some tubing to do that. But before we go and actually make that, we have to change the transmission mount. So this is the OEM CD009 transmission mount. It's fine, it's in fine shape, but it's rubber. We don't want poly mounts on the engine and a rubber mount on the transmission. We want poly mounts all around. So I messed around a little bit just looking on Amazon, and I found this very cheap transmission mount. It is not for a CD009. It was actually, I believe it was for a TH400, which is an old GM transmission, I believe. You know, I'm not real familiar with them. It had measurements for the bolt holes, and those line right up with the holes for the CD009 mount. So this is a nice, cheap, very cheap polyurethane mount. So I'm gonna go throw this underneath the car because we need that there to start our transmission mount. While I'm under here, since I got the Mustang rear diff in, I figured I'd show you. I did have to cut some of this bar right here, not on the apex subframe, but the actual frame or whatever of the car. Right here, you got to cut out approximately 1 inch back, 1 inch up, and 7-ish inches across to clear the Super 8.8 diff, because it fits in there nice and tight. So super easy. I'm glad I did this now, because if I hadn't and I had got the car all done and then went to put this on and had to cut that out, I would have been pretty annoyed. So it's good we got that cut out now. We'll patch it once we get the car back up on the rotisserie. And by the way, I know I didn't go over any of the installation of that rear subframe and the differential and the cross member and all that stuff. I am going to, but we're going to do it at final assembly. I'm going to go over the full Apex kit that I bought, installation right from the beginning to the end, so you guys can see how it's done. But there's no point in doing that twice. So since I'm just doing mock-up now, I figured I'd skip that part. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put a piece of flat plate right here, put a couple pieces of flat plate over here on our frame rails that we put in, this nice thick metal, and tubing across here. I really don't think this will be too hard, but I say that all the time. I probably should stop saying that. Now if we're looking at this here, like I said, I'm basically replicating this. We got a flat plate across here with some angles down the side to give it support, especially when you weld it on that bar. I don't have any way of bending this thick of metal. I don't have a torch, nothing like that. I definitely would not be able to bend that in the vise. So I'll just do it by cutting and welding. Always start with a pilot hole. And when you're drilling metal, for those of you guys who've never done it before, you want slow drill speed and high pressure. If you go fast speed, it's just gonna burn your bit right up. Pretty simple. Let's go see how that fits in the car. So I'm not sure how well you guys can see. Apologize, because I'm not used to trying to film underneath the car like this. But basically, what I'm thinking is this tube is going to go right back and forth to the frame rail here. We're obviously gonna have a bracket. I'm not welding this onto the frame. You can't have this permanent. It's gonna be removable. But I mean, looking at our heights, this bar doesn't even need to be bent. It looks like I can just go right straight across. So basically we want to take this. It's gonna have to be shortened up a lot because I definitely don't need it that long. But we're gonna come back here and kind of notch it right here. So our bar is gonna go right about there and be recessed up here. And we'll weld our bar right to this. And then we just build our mounts out here. But yeah, this looks like it's actually gonna work out very well. This is what we ended up with. Our tube is obviously gonna fit across right here. Let's go try it out in the car. Yeah. I mean, realistically, our bar, I mean, it's not exactly perfect right now because we're at an angle because my bar is too long or hitting on that side. I haven't cut it down to length yet because I don't know exactly how long I want it. But it's going to fit in there just like that, if you guys can see. And, you know, it's going to be somewhere around there on the frame rail. But again, I don't want to weld it directly to the frame rail because you need this to be removable. So basically what we're going to do is, this is way too big obviously, but we're going to have a plate that comes off of here. We'll put some rib nuts in the frame, holes in here so we can just bolt it in. So we'll have a plate here and it'll bend up this way and we'll weld our bar right on there. All right, so after a bunch of test fitting and figuring and blah, 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 this is what I came up with. This is going to, obviously this is our part that we already made that's going to sit on the trans mount itself. Crossbar, I welded 2 plates on. So, yeah, let's go throw that underneath the car. Well, I feel kind of dumb right now. I was looking through my fish racing box here because I was looking for a couple bolts. Actually, the bell housing bolts, because I couldn't remember what I did with them, and all of a sudden thought, well, probably in my fish racing box. So I opened the box up. What I find? Trans mount. Completely forgot that that came with that kit. So this is a energy suspension. It's a better name than that, you know, Chinese one that I bought off Amazon. So before we get any further, we're gonna throw that one in and, you know, work off of that one. It looks like it's basically the same thing. Honestly, just looking at it in the box here, it looks like the dimensions are the same. And this one actually says GM trans mount, so I bet it's made for the exact same transmission, so it should bolt in exactly as we have the other one right now. All right, hopefully you guys can see something down here, but basically, there's a ton of room around this transmission. The only place it gets close is at this bracket right here. Basically, I've got the transmission right up against it right now, or just, it's just touching, And what that does is that puts my mounts here right at the bottom of the frame. Literally exactly where we want it. Once I get it back up on the rotisserie, I'll decide if I want to just beat those in with a hammer, that area right up around here where it's touching, or if I want to just take that brace out, because I do not need that. It's just going to be a little bit of cutting the spot welds, but I think I like that idea the best. So I'm going to pop this back out, tack those panels back on here, and then we'll throw it back in the car. And actually, probably what I'll do first, you know what? I think I'm going to redesign this a little bit. Instead of having my panel go underneath here and bolting to the bottom, since we got this at exactly the right height, it's literally on the inside of the frame rail here, I think what I'm going to do is actually just have a piece on here like this, basically. I'm going to have to put a new rod on here because we need to make it longer. But I'm going to bolt it right up to the inside of the frame rail. Instead of having the weight pulling down on the rib nut, it'll be pulling sideways on it, be a little bit stronger. I don't know if it would matter, but I'm thinking maybe it would. See, we got a gap here because I just cut this at 2 feet because we were going to make a bracket and blah, blah, blah. I like that idea better though. So we're going to, this is part of fabrication, right? You're always analyzing, and there's a high chance of changing plans. So especially once you see something actually in place instead of just, you know, as an idea in your head. A little bit of a setback, but I think it's going to be a benefit overall. So I'm going to drill these holes up here to put our rib nuts in, and I want to try and minimize the amount of metal shavings that gets inside our frame rail, just because it's something that could rust. So one thing I've seen before is you take some generic grease and you dip your drill bit in it, and in theory it'll catch your metal shavings. So let's see how it works. Well, it works, but I don't know if it's really necessary in this case. All right, we're gonna put the riv nuts in, and for anybody that hasn't used a riv nut, this is what it looks like. It works much the same as a rivet, and I'll show you how in a second, but this is your actual nut. It's threaded on the inside, you got your bolt, threads together, and it's used for when you can't get at the back side to put a nut on, weld a nut on, hold the wrench, whatever. And you have a tool very similar to a rivet gun. You thread your riv nut on here, you put it through your hole, and then you squeeze, and it's going to pull down, and just like the rivet, it makes that expand. So it's going to expand behind your piece of metal. And if our piece of metal is, well, if our piece of metal is here like this, it's going to expand behind it, pinch, and then it can't come out. And it's actually way stronger than you'd think. And this is what it looks like after you squeeze it. If you can tell, it's expanded on this back side here, so it's pinched right around the metal. Your bolt will thread through here, ain't gonna come loose. So I'm gonna go throw those 4 rivets down in the frame rails. It's incredibly hard to get down underneath there with the camera and everything, and having these giant things underneath there, I don't think you guys will be able to see it, so that's why I wanted to show you up here. But I'm gonna go throw those in, and then we can bolt our 2 plates up and measure for our crossbar. That's what it looks like with the riv nuts in there. Let's just throw our plate up here. And I am going to be cutting this. I just didn't bother to cut it before, but we'll mark this and cut it when we're done. And we've got our tube across there. We want to be about 24 and 11/16. About 24 and 11/16. So just to show you guys, I cut my new rod here. See, that's the old one over there. This one's, what, 11/16 longer than the other one. But welded our bracket on here. Just tacked it on, obviously. So we're gonna go underneath the car, bolt that back to the transmission mount, and that'll allow us to weld this onto the end, and we can take it all back out and fully weld it. I also wanted to show you something while I'm underneath here. I also wanted to check and make sure that our driveline angle is good. And I'm certainly not an expert at this, but from what I know, you basically want the angle of your engine to transmission back, so the output that so that the angle that the output shaft is at is equal to your input shaft on your rear differential. So let's say your engine's pointed down slightly in the back, your differential should be pointed up at the same angle in the front, so that you have matching angles. And I got my angle gauge here, I stick that on there. And this is literally, I didn't measure this, I haven't touched it since I put that on there. It is literally exactly right. It is, the angle on the front output shaft is exactly matching the angle that Apex set on the rear. So we shouldn't have to worry about any vibration. Also, through this, I don't know why I didn't think to use this beforehand. I was using just a little bubble level. But I throw it on there. We are perfectly straight across at our mount, so perfectly happy. We can get this mount tacked in now. And now for the absolutely terrible part. I need to tack this in place from underneath the car. Here's what it looks like all tacked together. So now we just need to fully weld it, and it's ready to go in the car. Other than I need to trim these off. Like I said before when we were under the car, these are too long, so I'm gonna trim these off right about down at the bottom. That way they don't hang down below the frame rails any more than they absolutely need to, if at all. So we'll go get this welded up and ready to go back in the car. There we go. Got it all fully welded. Every seam is welded. Should be plenty strong enough. I definitely need to do some cleanup. It's got surface rust on this still. Corners need to be probably rounded off. They don't need to be that sharp. But it is 100% ready to go. Let's go make sure it still fits in the car. Look at that. It fits perfect. Very happy with that. Very happy. And now the transmission is sitting fully on it. No more jack stands. Well, there we go, guys. We got it in and mounted. There is an engine in there where there has not been one for the past 10, 11 months or so since we took the old L28 out. It fits in there amazingly. There is a ton of room because this engine bay is so huge. The Apex engineered kit made mounting the 2JZ super easy. Literally drops right in. Didn't have any struggle with it at all. Now I could have gone with their transmission mount, but I decided I wanted to make my own. It definitely didn't save me any time, that's for sure. However, you know, it's satisfying doing projects like this. And I like how mine bolts to the frame rails. Now, if you had the stock frame rails that are just thin sheet metal, you would not want to do this. I don't think it would be strong enough. Maybe it would, but I have my doubts. If you were rebuilding your car like I have been and built much stronger frame rails like I did out of the 2.5-inch square tubing, they're plenty strong enough to support that transmission. But yeah, overall, very successful project. It is crazy seeing this thing sitting down on the ground. And, well, somewhat on the ground. On the quick jacks anyway, not on the rotisserie. With an engine in it. It makes it look like a completely different car. I'm going to throw the fenders on it probably here at some point. I just want to get a good look. Just a little bit of excitement, I guess. Just to see even more like a real car. But yeah, it makes me very excited to actually get to the point where we're putting the 2JZ in and trying to get it to run. But yeah, I'm going to end the video off here. If anybody else is thinking about making a transmission mount like this, I'll put down in the description what I use for materials. And I've been putting the tools and everything that I use, supplies, in the description so you guys can go click on those if you need to buy anything that I'm using. I'm going to leave that unpainted for now, you know, that transmission crossmember, because it's just sitting in there. I'm going to be taking the engine back out soon. At some point, before we go and put it in the car and we start final assembly, I'll clean it up and I'll actually paint it with some good paint, not just spray paint. Or maybe I'll have some stuff that I need to get powder coated and maybe I'll send it out for powder coating, because that would be nice too. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. I am very excited to see this 2JZ in there. I'm very excited with how well it dropped in, how much room we got, and how good that transmission crossmember came out. So let me know what you guys think. Hit the like button if you could. Leave some comments, and I'll see you guys in the next video.